Hello, my name is Rebecca, and this is my channel where you'll find a wide variety of videos with subjects about mental health, physical health, 12-step recovery, healthy relationships, and even a little bit of beauty and anti-aging advice. So today's video is going to be the anatomy of healthy relationships. And this is really on my mind because of what I see in my real life, because of the information, how much this information has changed my life and the way that I deal with people and deal with relationships, but largely because this information was so difficult for me to find. There's so much on the internet. I'm mostly on YouTube. I'm not mostly on TikTok or other platforms in terms of even just my own viewing. But I found it really, really difficult to find information about healthy relationships and what does that look like? What are the markers? What are the green flags of a healthy relationship, both romantic relationships and other types of relationships? And what I found, which you've probably found too, is that there's tons and tons of information about what not to do. I almost felt like I had to find this information. I almost had to dig through a mountain of mostly kind of garbage to find the diamonds that were buried at the bottom. And as I look back over my life in 12-step recovery, if you watch this video, you're going to quickly find out that I have a few decades of 12-step recovery behind me, and it's helped me enormously and, influenced my life and my path a lot. So I've done Al-Anon and other 12-step programs as well. Even in those programs, to give you an example, I remember when I was learning about finding a sponsor in the program and how do you find a sponsor? How do you know if it's a good sponsor? I was reading a booklet that I picked up at a meeting, and one of the things it talked about was that both the sponsor and the sponsee have a responsibility to make sure that the sponsor-sponsee relationship does not become codependent. And that sounds like good advice, and I was like, I'm on board with that. But I remember reading that and thinking, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to tell the difference between a healthy, functional relationship, between a sponsor and sponsee or anyone else, and an unhealthy, codependent or toxic, relationship. What does that look like? How can I make sure that my relationship with my sponsor is not codependent if I don't really know what the markers of codependence are? And the booklet was not helpful. And I was running into this problem everywhere because if you grew up in a dysfunctional family, you didn't have an example in front of you of what a healthy marriage really looks like. You weren't taught the things that you would have learned in a healthy family. In a healthy family, you would have had a bunch of good examples of what healthy relationships look like, what healthy marriages look like, and you would have also been taught when you were a child and an adolescent and a young adult what the red flags are, what green flags are, what maybe some yellow flags are. You would have been taught these things either explicitly by your parents or more in implied ways. But if you didn't have that, you didn't get that education. And so how do you know? I have seen, as you probably have too, on the internet, there's tons and tons of people kind of saying what not to do. And these are often in short little videos or in videos that sort of contain tips about this is how narcissists behave, or, this is the mistake that codependents make over and over again. And often and I've watched some of these videos and I followed some of these people. And some of these videos are very cute and funny and they present it in a humorous way. But they're not super helpful in terms of, it's like, okay, if I'm seeing myself repeating codependent patterns, what's the right way to do it? It's sort of like if someone's going to teach you how to bake a cake and you've never baked a cake before and you're not even sure what a cake is. If you just walk into the kitchen and you reach for something and someone says, no, don't use that. That's the spaghetti sauce, and then you go reach for a pan and they say, no, you don't need a pan. Imagine how long it would take you to actually bake a good cake by someone just constantly telling you it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And that's what I found for a long time on the internet. So when I did find that true information, that accurate information of how do emotionally healthy people date, and then what is an emotionally healthy relationship in terms of friendships or in terms of any relationships, weeding through the information that says it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, to find what it is, has been an absolute treasure for me to find those things. And it's been a real game changer for me. So that's why I wanted to make this video. I think it's really, really important, and a lot of people don't know this stuff. So you're going to see me glancing down to my notes at some point. So the other thing that I want to say, which has also been pointed out by a YouTuber whom I really admire named Doughty, who has been, he and Heidi Priebe have been and probably are the biggest influence on me in terms of understanding psychology and understanding psychology of relationships and codependence recovery. So I really recommend both of their channels. I'm going to put links to their channels in the description box below. But one of the things he points out is that the internet is full of finger pointing. It's full of people saying, the narcissist, or, those stupid codependents, and kind of fault finding like that. And there are times where, real victimization occurs and we all do need to vent. I personally feel that getting that venting out in your therapist's office or in a 12-step program, or maybe with a trusted friend, is going to be more useful than sort of falling into a pattern of continually sort of, getting out your trauma through many different videos. There's a number of reasons why that's not super useful. And the biggest reason is because we can actually only change ourselves. You can't really change someone else. In my experience, people change when they're ready to change. It's not when you, it's not when you want them to change or you do something to make them change. The only time I've ever heard of that working is maybe in marriages or romantic relationships where there was an absolute ultimatum given of your behavior has to change or I'm leaving you. And even then, that's a very risky proposition. It only works some of the time. It doesn't really work. So I really advocate changing yourself and working on yourself, and then learning who is a person that is healthy enough that you want that person in your life. Because that's what's going to change your life, actually, is you healing, learning about relationships, and putting in boundaries. And when I encounter someone now where, I see a pattern of abusive behavior, narcissistic behavior, toxically self-centered behavior, that's the indication to me that that's just not someone I want in my life. And, we're not on the same page. And in my view, that's what healthy people do. They just have standards, and if a person isn't, up to those standards, there's going to be boundaries or there's going to be disconnect from that relationship. So I'm going to have a little side note here because it really needs to be said because it's so important. There are going to be future videos about this, but relationships are a responsibility. Any relationship that's beyond, the person who bags your groceries at the grocery store whom you don't know, carries a responsibility with it. And intimate relationships carry a responsibility for that person's feelings and that person's well-being. So I know this is kind of the vegetables, information, but it needs to be said because the truth is emotional maturity is absolutely key when it comes to having good, lasting relationships. There isn't really any way around that. And emotional maturity is a journey. I know it is. I'm on that journey too. I'm not saying by any means I'm perfected in emotional maturity, but emotional maturity and emotional responsibility are absolutely central to being able to function relationally. That's the core of, the short answer to what makes healthy relationships is emotionally healthy people who've become emotionally mature and emotionally responsible. When you have two people who are emotionally mature and emotionally responsible, then you have a beautiful, healthy relationship. And when you have one or both people who are stuck in emotional immaturity for whatever reason, they're going to play that out in their relationships in many different ways. So before I move on to kind of tips and tricks and red flags and green flags about relationships, I want to say there is an aspect to which all the tips in the world are not going to help you if the work has not been done and emotional maturity is not present. There's no kind of shortcut around that. So in addition to that, I want to say that the mistake a lot of people make is that feeling lonely, unfortunately, and believe me, I'm right there in the trenches with you, is not the indication that you are actually ready for an intimate relationship or whatever kind of relationship. Feeling the desire for relationship and feeling even biological urges does not mean that the person is ready for the responsibility of relationship. And I really have compassion for myself as I look back at myself in my 20s. I feel quite at peace now with kind of my journey and my healing and what's going on in my life. But in my 20s, I really, really suffered because I really had a strong desire to get married and be in a relationship. And at the time, I now can see that I was just not emotionally healthy enough for that. I was not mature enough. I didn't have an understanding of emotional maturity. And I had the self-centeredness and the toxic emotions and the unhandled anger that comes with all of that. And it's really sad and unfortunate that the desire for relationship is not necessarily a good indication. In fact, in many times, it's not an indication that a person is ready. So this is where the hard work comes in of we need to actually be ready for the responsibilities of any kind of relationship, even friendships, even family relationships. And just having a desire for that does not necessarily indicate that we are ready. So what's the definition of a healthy relationship? So here we are at the punchline, so to say. So it took me, I read so many articles online, folks. It took me so much research to find out this basic truth that a healthy relationship is a win-win situation. And this is not just talking about dating relationships. This is talking about any relationship, even a relationship between coworkers, even a friendship. A healthy relationship is one in which both people are happy with what they're getting out of the relationship. It's just a win-win. A dysfunctional relationship is either a win-lose. One person's happy with the relationship and with what they're getting out of it, but the other person's not. Or the most toxic kind of relationship obviously would be a lose-lose relationship where neither person is happy with what they're getting. Neither person is happy in the relationship, but they stay in it anyway. And sadly, this does happen, and we can all probably think of examples where we've seen that happen. Something that I didn't understand growing up, because I grew up in a feminist household, really, which is not necessarily a bad thing, where I learned a lot about equality between men and women. One of the things that I assumed is that, especially in marital relationships or dating relationships, the two people were getting the same thing out of the relationship. So both of them were getting companionship. Both of them would be getting, support with the finances. because I was taught, there was a lot of emphasis in my home between equality between men and women. And which, again, not bad. That's just where I'm coming from. It was really surprising to me when I found out that oftentimes in relationships, what the two people are getting out of the relationship is not the same thing, and that's totally okay. And this happens a lot, actually, where, for instance, one person might be getting companionship and they might be, being entertained. Maybe their spouse has a great sense of humor. And what the other person is getting is respect in society, because maybe the person they've married is considered at a, somewhat higher socioeconomic level than themselves. And maybe they're also getting more financial stability. So what the two people are getting is two completely different things. But the relationship is completely healthy and happy because both people are getting something that they want. When I think about this, I always think about a couple that I saw who were standing in front of me in a Walmart. This would be maybe like 15 years ago. And they were a married couple, and they were playing with their baby, who I think was about maybe 1.5 years old. And the husband in the couple was a little bit older. He was maybe about 40 years old. And he was obviously from India, and he was dressed fairly businessy, kind of very clean cut. And it seemed to me that he was probably a tech employee, a Microsoft employee, or a computer, software designer, something like that. He kind of gave that impression, kind of reserved way of moving. And then his young wife, who was with him, was much younger. She was in her early 20s. She gave the impression of being raised kind of blue collar. She was wearing very brightly colored, very short mini skirt, a brightly colored tank top, and like flip flops. And the way that she talked, because I was standing behind them, so I heard their conversation for quite a while, and I saw them interact. And my impression was that she was coming from a completely different background than he was coming from. And they were really noticeable because it was almost like when you saw these two people together, it was almost like, what happened? Like they're very far apart in age, like almost just nothing in common. And yet both of them seemed to be quite happy and content. And I realized, I think what had happened is that they both wanted a family, they both wanted children, and they had a compatible set of goals and desires. And so even though they themselves were very different people who might not have been even in the same friend group, their relationship was a functional and a healthy relationship, or it would be considered a functional relationship from a psychological point of view, because both of them were happy with it. Both of them felt like they were winning. So that was kind of really eye-opening to me, because this has caused me to pretty considerably change my idea of what makes relationships work. And it's been really cool for me in terms of friendships, because it really opens up kind of a different worlds, because now I don't necessarily need my friends to be people who are coming from the same kind of background that I'm coming from, or who, that they don't need to be people that I have a lot in common with sort of on paper. As long as both of us are feeling like we're benefiting from the friendship, then that's what actually works. Okay, so I have one last point here, which speaks directly to how I've applied this in my own life. And I also want to thank Doughty again for pointing out that if you don't vibe with someone, if you don't click with someone, it's actually really good to know that right away, because you don't want to waste your time investing in relationships that really don't have a future. And it's a little bit, I remember being quite surprised when I first heard him teach this. He teaches this really regularly. But the truth is that many of us who have a tendency to fall into people-pleasing, codependent behavior, I think there's a sort of idea in the common wisdom of society that you just want everyone to like you. And you want to be liked by everyone. You want to be popular. I grew up with that idea that it's good to be popular. And it turns out that that's actually not true. That's not the most practical wisdom, because what will happen if you try to get everyone to like you is you'll fall into people pleasing. You'll become a lot less authentic because you'll be trying to become what people want instead of being your authentic self, which doesn't really work. You want to be your authentic self. You want people in your life that you can be your authentic self with. That's what really works. And you don't want to be sort of dispersing your energy to a lot of people and investing in a lot of relationships that aren't really on your path, that don't really click with who you really are. So I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And this really opens the door to, in a sense, everyone has something to give in terms of relationship. Like maybe you have a great sense of humor. Maybe you are a good handyman. Everyone has something that they bring to the table, and relationships can work. And I'm not suggesting that you create intimate relationships with people that you don't have a lot of basic purpose or goals in common with. But it's really kind of interesting because it becomes much, it opens the door to a lot of relationships that are healthy and good if you can just have relationships where everybody's benefiting. And because everybody kind of brings something to the table, it's been kind of cool for me to see how many possibilities that does kind of open up. Okay, I think I have quite a bit more to say about these topics, but I think this video is long enough for today. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've gotten something out of it, and I hope to see you next time.